I have catalogued 4,412 species across 11 star systems. I have stood inside the event horizon of a dying sun and taken notes with a steady hand. I have watched civilizations compress 1,000,000 years of history into a single, forgettable Tuesday. I have, on 3 separate occasions, been declared legally dead by governments that later had to apologize in writing. None of it prepared me for a human wedding. More specifically, none of it prepared me for this human wedding. The one that wasn't supposed to happen. The one that started as a lie told between 2 people who were absolutely, catastrophically, and, with full situational awareness, destroying themselves by telling it. He said, "Pretend it's me." She said nothing. Which, I would learn, was the loudest thing she had ever said. I was there for professional reasons. I repeat this to myself even now, in the small hours when my log-keeping becomes less documentation and more confession. I was there for professional reasons. I was observing. I was neutral. I was not neutral. What follows is my official account of the events surrounding the threshold ceremony of Commander Yoel Ashari and the subsequent, well, you'll see. I've been told human love stories require a beginning, a middle, and an end. What I observed had all 3. The problem is they happened in the wrong order. I am beginning this log because Station Commander Thel told me, quote, "You look like you're about to vibrate out of your carapace, Sovek. Write something down before you short-circuit." This is, apparently, what passes for emotional guidance in a mixed-species posting. I am writing something down. The first time I saw Yoel Ashari, she was signing a requisition form for 40 kilograms of concrete mix. I note this not because it is dramatic, it is profoundly not dramatic, but because everything about what followed hinged on that single, mundane moment. The concrete. The form. The fact that she didn't look up when I entered the supply bay, even though I am, by most accounts, visually arresting to humans. Something about the secondary eye arrangement. They tend to startle. She didn't startle. "You're the new archivist," she said. Still not looking up. Pen moving. "I am," I said. "You're going to want to know where the coffee is." "I don't drink, you will." She signed the last line with a kind of finality that made the pen sound like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Then, she looked up. Brown eyes. The specific brown of river water in late autumn, which I know because I have 12 archived photographs of late autumn rivers filed under earth, seasonal phenomena, melancholic subset. I noted this detail clinically. I note everything clinically. It is my function. "Sovek," she said, testing it. "Yes. That's going to take some getting used to." "Most things on this station will," I said, which was meant to be reassuring and landed, from her expression, as something else entirely. A corner of her mouth moved. The left one. I would later identify this as the not amused but cataloging you expression, distinct from the actually amused expression by approximately 3 millimeters of cheek movement. I catalogued both. Commander Yoel Ashari, I noted in my preliminary station file, was 31 years old, 7 months into an 18-month posting on Station Meridian, and possessed of a reputation that preceded her through the corridor briefings like weather. Competent. Difficult to read. Doesn't waste words. Has opinions about structural load-bearing calculations that border on the religious. The last note came from a subordinate officer who had written it with what I can only describe as traumatized respect. She handed me the concrete form. "File that." "I'm the station archivist," I said. "I archive significant cultural and historical and requisition forms." "Welcome to Meridian." She was already walking. "Coffee's in the 3rd bay. Don't let Kel touch it first or you'll get whatever he's been experimenting with, and last week that included what I believe was fermented oat paste." I filed the concrete form. This is how it began. I should establish, for the record, that I am not a romantic. My species does not reproduce through pair bonding rituals. We have no equivalent of the human concept of courtship, which I have studied extensively and find to be an elaborate performance of mutual vulnerability that seems, on paper, to be the least efficient method of genetic and social continuation ever devised. On paper, Station Meridian housed 47 personnel. Of those 47, I interacted professionally with 31 in the first month. Of those 31, 23 were easy to archive, predictable behavioral patterns, consistent emotional registers, filing systems that made intuitive sense. Yad al-Ashari defied filing. Not dramatically. She wasn't erratic or unstable. She was, if anything, the opposite. She was steady in a way that most beings are not, the way a river is steady even when the current is violent, the way a load-bearing wall is steady even when the structure above it has cracks. She worked 14-hour cycles without visible diminishment. She made decisions in the field that I observed 3 times and understood approximately 2 of. She had a habit, when reading, of pressing the pad of her thumb against her lower lip, not chewing it, not moving it, just resting it there, as if her mouth needed something to hold on to while her mind went somewhere it didn't want to be followed. I noted it. I noted it several times. I noted it enough times that I started a separate subfile, which I labeled Commander Ashari Behavioral Anomalies and which contained, after 6 weeks, 43 entries. None of them were anomalies. I knew this. I filed them anyway. The station psychologist, Dr. Nena Okafor, asked me once how I was acclimating. Well, I said. You've been spending a lot of time in the supply bay, she said. Inventory cross-referencing is within my archival mandate. Dr. Okafor is a small woman with the particular stillness of someone who has heard every lie a person can tell themselves and has decided, as a professional courtesy, to let them finish. She looked at me for a moment that lasted slightly longer than necessary. Sure, she said. The transmission arrived on a Tuesday. I know it was Tuesday because Yael had, without explanation, produced a small handwritten calendar that she pinned to the wall of the Situation Room, with Tuesdays marked in red. When I asked why, she said, Tuesdays are when things go sideways. When I asked how she knew, she said, they always have been. I have, since that conversation, reviewed my own records. Tuesdays do account for a disproportionate number of significant events in my archived catalog. I don't have an explanation for this. I find it deeply unsettling. The transmission was from her family. I know this because she read it in the doorway of the supply bay she had been walking past, screen in hand, and she stopped mid-step with the specific paralysis of someone who has just received news that rearranges furniture they didn't know they'd arranged. I was cross-referencing inventory. I was not watching her. I was absolutely watching her. The expression lasted 4 seconds. Then, it closed, like a door, like a blast shield, like 40 kilograms of concrete poured over something that needed to stop moving. She lowered the screen. She looked at nothing in the middle distance for 1 additional second. Then, she walked in, sat down on the supply crate across from my workstation, and said, "My mother wants to know when I'm getting married." "Ah," I said. "She's found someone." The screen went face down on the crate beside her. "A family. Old arrangement. My father's side. She stopped. Pressed her thumb against her lower lip. "It's not an order. It's not like that. She's asking." "But, the asking is not entirely a question," I said. She looked at me. Something shifted in her expression, not the amused expression, not the cataloging one, but a third one I hadn't filed yet. Closer to seen. Closer to careful. "No," she said. "It's not entirely a question." I didn't know what to say. My archival training covers documentation, translation, the cataloging of cultural practices across 67 known species. It does not cover what to say when a person you have 43 files on tells you their mother wants to arrange their marriage. I said, "What do you want?" She laughed. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh. It was not a happy sound, exactly, it was the sound of someone releasing pressure through the only valve that didn't require them to explain themselves. Short, sharp, aimed at nothing. "What I want," she said, "is to do my job, finish my posting, and not have this conversation." That seems like 3 separate wants. They're all the same want. I considered this. The transmission, does it require a response? Within the month, apparently. She picked up her screen. Stood. She was doing the closing thing again. I could see it happening, the way the lines of her face settled back into the configuration that meant on duty. I'll figure it out. She was halfway to the door. I do not know what happened in the space between her being halfway to the door and me opening my mouth. My behavioral log shows no internal deliberation. There is simply the gap, and then there is the sentence, arriving already said, impossible to retrieve, you could tell them you have someone. She stopped. Turned around. Slowly. I could, she said. You'd need a name. I kept my eyes on my inventory screen. This is what I tell myself. I kept my eyes on my screen. And someone who could, if asked, corroborate. Respond to communication. Be plausible. The supply bay was very quiet. Sovek, she said. I'm an archivist. I have records of thousands of courtship traditions across 67 species. I finally looked up. Made myself look up. I could be plausible. She stared at me. I stared back. You, she said, are an alien. Your mother has presumably never met one. Another silence. Longer. She had a look on her face that I did not have in my files anywhere, something between "Are you serious?" and "Why does this almost make sense?" and she pressed her thumb against her lower lip and stared at me for long enough that I began mentally composing a dignified retraction. It would have to be real enough that she'd stop asking, she said finally. I understand the parameters. She'll want to know things. About you. About how it happened. I have an excellent memory. Sovek. The "are you serious" part of the expression was winning. She might want to meet you. Station Meridian offers excellent video communication facilities. She exhaled. Long and controlled, the kind of exhale that is also a decision being made in real time. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at her screen. She looked at me. Pretend it's me, she said. Not a question. Not quite a statement. Something in between, said with her voice level and her eyes doing something I couldn't catalog fast enough. Pretend it's when you write back to her. When you explain. Pretend it's me telling her. I understand. Do you? I held her gaze. My secondary eyes did the thing humans find unsettling. She didn't look away. Yes, I said. I do. She nodded once. Tucked her screen under her arm. Walked to the door, and, this time made it through. I sat alone in the supply bay for what I recorded as 11 minutes and 40 seconds, which is an extremely long time for me to sit without taking notes. I did not take notes. I opened a new file. I labeled it, Ashari, Y, Personal. And I sat with the weight of what I had just volunteered for, which was not what I told myself it was, and I knew it wasn't, and I filed the knowledge in the new folder and closed it and went back to the inventory and told myself I was still being professional. This is a lie I maintained for exactly 3 weeks. Then, the first transmission went out, and it had my name in it, and Yael read it over my shoulder with her hand resting on the back of my chair, close enough that I could catalog the specific warmth of a human standing 3 inches away in a pressurized station environment at standard atmospheric temperature, and I stopped pretending I was being professional. I did not sleep that night. I do not sleep in the human sense. My rest cycle is a 4-hour metabolic suspension that requires no darkness and no silence, but I lay in my bunk in the dark anyway, in the human station dark with the hum of the ventilation and the occasional distant sound of Kel doing whatever Kel does to coffee at 3 in the morning, and I thought about the word pretend. Pretend it's me. She had said it like she was handing me a tool. Like, here, use this, it's useful. Practical Yoel Ashari, commander of Station Meridian, solving a logistics problem with available resources. I thought about the 43 files. I thought about the thumb against the lower lip. I thought about the late autumn river brown of her eyes when she'd said to you and waited for me to answer. My log keeping, Dr. Okafor once told me, was a form of attachment disguised as observation. I told her this was an interesting interpretation and filed it under Okafor, N, professional interactions. In the dark of my bunk, with the ventilation humming, I opened the Okafor file and reread that entry. Then, I opened the Ashari personal file. There was only one entry so far. She said, "Pretend it's me." I stared at it for a long time. Then, I added a second line, "I am not going to be able to pretend." I closed the file. The ventilation hummed. Kel produced a sound from the third bay that I chose to believe was related to coffee. Outside the station, space was doing what space does, which is nothing, everywhere, all at once, vast and absolute and completely indifferent to two people in a supply bay on a Tuesday, making an arrangement that both of them understood, in the parts of themselves they hadn't filed away, was not an arrangement at all. I started writing the transmission at 0400. By 0530, I had 17 drafts. By 0600, when the station lights came up and Yael walked past my doorway in her morning routine, not stopping, not looking in, just the sound of her boots on the corridor floor and the small displacement of air that meant she was there, I sent the 18th. It began, "My name is Sovek. Your daughter asked me to introduce myself." And it was true. All of it was true. That was, I would come to understand, the entire problem. I have started making the coffee before Kel gets to it. This is either adaptation or defeat. I'm no longer certain of the distinction. The thing about building a lie is this: you have to decide, early, how much of it to make true. We decided too much. I say we because Yael was meticulous about it in a way that should have been my first warning. She brought a notepad to our second planning session, actual paper, the kind she used for structural calculations, the kind she trusted with load-bearing numbers, and she sat across from me in the situation room with the station empty around us at 2100 hours and she said, "We need a story." "We have a story," I said. "Colleagues. Station posting. Proximity leading to she'll want details." The pen was already moving. My mother is not a details for the sake of details person. She wants the one detail that makes it real. The thing that couldn't be invented. I watched her write. She had a specific way of making lists, numbers on the left, the item in the middle, and, then, a dash at the end with a short, brutally honest assessment in smaller writing. Item 1, how we met. Dash. Supply bay, concrete requisition, boring, make it better. Better how? I asked. Pick something true, she said, not looking up. Then, make it mean something it didn't mean at the time. That's how you make a lie my mother can't find the seam in. I considered this. The first time I saw you, you were signing a form and you didn't look up. That's not romantic. I noted it, I said. The not looking up. I filed it. She did look up then. The left corner of her mouth moved 3 millimeters. You filed my form signing. I file everything. But, I noted separately that you didn't startle. Everyone startles. Something in her face went very still. Not the blast shield stillness. A different kind. The kind that looks like nothing because it's working very hard to look like nothing. Okay, she said. Wrote something on the pad. Turned it so I couldn't see. That's true. Yes. That could work. Yes. She wrote for another moment. Then, what else? And, this is where I should have applied professional restraint. I have significant professional restraint. I have applied it successfully across 44 interspecies documentation projects spanning 9 years of active archival service. I am, by most accounts, extremely restrained. The thumb, I said. She stopped writing. Against your lower lip. When you're reading something difficult. I've noted it. Several times. The pen was not moving. You notice that, she said. Not a question. It was in a behavioral file. Saying this out loud was a significantly different experience than having it exist quietly in a folder. I labeled it anomalies initially, which was not accurate. It wasn't anomalous. I just needed a folder. Yael put the pen down. She looked at me across the situation room table with the station's recycled air moving quietly between us, and she had an expression on her face that I had never seen before and could not immediately categorize, and I felt something in my chest cavity that my biology does not have an exact name for, but which I understand, from 67 species worth of documented literature, maps closely to the human experience of bracing for impact. Sovek, she said. The file, I said, has 43 entries. The silence was approximately 8 seconds. Tell her, Yael said finally, that you noticed the thumb thing. That's something real. I know. She picked up the pen. That's why it'll work. She went back to her list. I went back to my inventory screen that I had brought as professional camouflage. The station hummed. Eventually Cal walked past the doorway, saw us, reversed, and walked faster in the other direction, which I can only interpret as tactical social intelligence. We built the story in that room over 3 sessions, and every single true thing we chose made the architecture stronger, and, by the end of it I had stopped thinking of it as architecture and started thinking of it as a record. Which was either romantic or delusional. I have a file for that too. Her mother's name was Devora. Devora Ashari was 64 years old, a retired civil engineer from a city in the northern part of the country Yael grew up in, and she communicated primarily through voice messages that she recorded while walking, so that behind her voice you always heard footsteps and wind and the occasional sound of what I identified as a market voices, transaction calls, the specific percussion of a busy Tuesday morning in a human city. The first time I received a direct message from her, I listened to it 6 times. Not because it was complicated. Because it was simple in a way I hadn't prepared for. She said, Yael tells me you're careful. She said you're the most careful person she's ever met. Coming from Yael, that's not a small thing. I want you to know, I know she's far away and I know she doesn't ask for things and I know she's better at surviving than she is at letting herself be taken care of. I wanted to say that to you. To whoever you are. Whoever's doing that. Thank you. I sat with that message for a long time. Then, I went and found Yael. She was in the engineering section, 3 stories of structural diagrams spread across the floor around her like she was the center of a complicated paper universe. She looked up when I came in. The cataloging expression. She messaged me, I said. I know. I asked her to. Yael. She needed to feel like she knew you. She looked back at her diagrams. She worries. She can't, from this distance, she can't do anything, so she worries. If she feels like she knows you, the worrying has somewhere to go. I stood in the doorway. She thanked me, I said. For taking care of you. Yael's pen stopped moving. She didn't finish the sentence. Started a different one. You don't have to take that on. I know. This is a logistics solution. You said, I know what I said. She looked at me. The third expression. The scene one. She hated it, I had come to understand. Not because it felt bad but because she didn't know what to do with it. Being seen was a foreign object in her operational framework, and she kept trying to file it somewhere it didn't fit. You responded, she said. To her. Yes. What did you say? I told her exactly what I said. Which was, she doesn't make it easy. I think that's the point. I think the things worth finding are usually the ones that don't make it easy. Yael was quiet for a long time. Then, she said, very carefully, that's not pretend. No, I said. It isn't. She looked back at her diagrams. I stayed in the doorway. Between us the air did nothing dramatic, made no announcements, just moved the way air moves in a station, recycled, functional, slightly too dry, carrying in it the specific silence of 2 people not saying the things they are saying. Okay, she said finally. 1 word. Aimed at the diagram. Landing somewhere else. I went back to my workstation. I opened the Ashari personal file and added a new entry, which was longer than the others and which I closed without reading back, because some things do not benefit from being archived the moment they happen. 6 weeks became 8. 8 became 12. I would like to say it escalated gradually, but that is not accurate. It escalated consistently, which is a different thing. A gradual escalation you can track and adjust. A consistent one just keeps the same quiet pace until one day you look back and the distance between here and where you started is not a gradient but a cliff. We had dinners. In the official sense, station personnel had shared meals twice a week in the common area, and Yael and I had begun sitting together in a way that no one commented on because everyone on Station Meridian was, apparently, more perceptive than either of us gave them credit for. Kel, who was my primary source of accidental human behavioral data, started leaving 2 coffee mugs out in the morning. Dr. Okafor stopped asking me how I was acclimating. Officer Reyes, the youngest of the station crew, asked me once, with the direct unfiltered curiosity of someone who has not yet learned that some questions shouldn't be asked in corridors, "Are you two actually, we're colleagues?" I said. He looked at me the way people look at math that doesn't add up but they can't find the error. "Right," he said. "We had a situation, 8 weeks in, that I have labeled in my log as the pipe incident because the official incident report calls it a structural integrity event and that is so inadequate it's almost offensive. What happened was, a pressure seal in the lower maintenance corridor failed at 0300, the corridor flooded, and Yael was in that corridor because she was Yael and, apparently sleep was optional on nights when the structural load reports looked wrong. By the time I reached her, I was awake. I was always awake at 0300, my rest cycle had been profoundly disrupted for approximately 6 weeks and I was choosing not to examine the cause. She was chest deep in recycled water in a corridor with failing emergency lighting, and she had a maintenance panel open and was doing something to it with her hands that I could not catalog fast enough because the water was at her collarbone and her face was absolutely calm in the way that means the opposite. "I need a second pair of hands," she said. "Tell me where." She told me. I did it. The seal held. The water level dropped. The emergency lighting did something unstable and then stabilized, and we were standing in 6 inches of retreating gray water in a maintenance corridor at 0300, and Yael pressed her wet back against the wall and tipped her head back and exhaled at the ceiling for a very long time. "Good," she said. "To the ceiling. Are you injured?" "No. The water temperature was I'm fine, Sovek. You should be in medical for I'm fine." I was standing very close to her. The corridor was narrow. The water around our feet made small sounds as it drained through the grate. Her hair was wet against her face and her uniform was dark with water and she was looking at the ceiling like it owed her something, and I was close enough to, I catalogued this with the specific horror of someone filing evidence against themselves, close enough to hear her heartbeat, which was coming down from fast, still faster than baseline, settling. She lowered her head. Looked at me. We were very close. "You came," she said. "You needed hands. You were up. I'm always up at 0300. Something moved through her expression, not the cataloging one, not the scene one, not any of the ones I had files for. New. Unclassified. "Why?" she asked. I held her gaze. I did not answer. She knew I didn't answer. I knew she knew. The water drained quietly around our boots. "Sovek," she said. Soft. The way you say a word when you're testing what it costs you to say it. "I'll write this up," I said. "For the incident report." I stepped back. Created distance. Filed it as professional judgment. She watched me go. I heard her boots in the shallow water, not following, not retreating, just standing. Just still. And then, very quietly, to the maintenance corridor and the retreating water and no one in particular. "Yeah," she said. "Okay." The transmission from Devora came in week 11. Not a voice message. A formal one text, formatted, the kind her mother sent when she had organized her thoughts into something she wanted to get exactly right. It was addressed to both of us. It said, "I want you to come home with her. When her posting ends. I want to meet you properly. I think I need to see this for myself. A mother's prerogative. I hope that's not too much to ask. I read it at my workstation. Then, I walked to the engineering section. Yael was there. She had already read it. I could tell by the blast shield configuration, the way her spine was doing something technically correct and fundamentally defensive. I'll tell her it's not possible, she said. Before I could speak. Distance, operational costs, it's a reasonable or, I said. She looked at me. Or, I said again. The engineering section was quiet. Somewhere in the station, Kel was doing something to coffee. Reyes was probably asleep. Dr. Okafor was probably writing something in her professional journal about the two of us and the inevitable, which I understand she had discussed with at least one other crew member. Yael turned to face me fully. Sovek, she said. Your mother wants to see it, I said. She wants to see, not us. Not the report. She wants to see the thing itself. Whether it's real. It's not, she stopped. Finish that sentence, I said. The station hummed. I don't know how to finish that sentence, she said. I had been waiting for that. I had been waiting for it for 6 weeks and 12 days and an undetermined number of 0300 wakings and 43 original files plus a secondary Ashari personal file that was now substantially longer than the professional one. Then, maybe, I said, you should stop trying to finish it. She looked at me for a long time. Outside the station, somewhere in the dark, space did its vast and indifferent thing. The ventilation hummed. The recycled air moved. Yael Ashari, Commander, Station Meridian, 31 years old, who did not startle, who pressed her thumb against her lower lip when things were difficult, who had signed a concrete requisition form on a Tuesday without looking up and had not, since then, entirely stopped being looked at, said nothing. Which was, as I had learned by now, the loudest thing she ever said. I took out my screen. I began drafting the response to Devora. I did not pretend. Dr. Okafor asked me today how I was sleeping. I told her my rest cycle has been irregular for approximately 4 months. She said, I know. Then, she said, does she know? I said, know what? She looked at me. I said, I don't want to discuss this. She said, I know that too. I have closed the Okafor professional interactions file. Some data should not be collected. We planned the visit for month 4, end of Yoel's posting. 7 days of leave, enough to travel to the city in the north where Devora lived, where Yael grew up, where there was apparently a house with a blue door that Yael mentioned once, in passing, with the specific 2-word compression of someone dropping a fact that has weight they're not acknowledging, blue door. She said it like I should already know what it meant. I filed it. I did not ask. I was, by month 4, very good at filing things and very bad at pretending the filing was sufficient. The crew knew. This was not a deduction, it was evident in the way Kel started leaving 3 mugs out in the morning, his, mine, hers, in the way Reyes stopped asking questions he'd already stopped needing to ask, in the way Dr. Okafor had begun smiling at me in corridors with the specific satisfaction of someone whose professional hypothesis has been proven. They knew. The station knew. The station was a small pressurized metal object in space full of 47 people who had been living on top of each other for 7 months and had consequently evolved the social perceptiveness of a single very attentive organism. Yael knew the crew knew. She didn't say anything about it. I didn't say anything about it. We had constructed, over 4 months, an elaborate architecture of not saying things that was structurally more complex than anything in Yael's engineering diagrams, and which bore a load-bearing weight that I understood, professionally, technically, as an archivist of cultures and their collapse patterns, could not be sustained indefinitely. One Tuesday, as predicted, it went sideways. It was not dramatic. That is the part one need to document accurately, because dramatic is the story we tell after the fact. In the moment it was simply, Yael came to my workstation at 2200 with 2 mugs of coffee she had made herself, which had never happened before. And she sat down in the chair she had started keeping on her side of my workstation over the previous weeks, and she handed me a mug, and we sat in the quiet of the archive room with the station settling around us and the screens on their overnight cycles, and she said, my mother wants to know what to expect. I already told her, not about your biology. She wrapped both hands around her mug. About what, how it is. Between us. She wants to know what it looks like when we're together. So she can watch for it. I looked at the screen in front of me. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her to ask you. The archive room was very quiet. The screens glowed. Yael drank her coffee with both hands around the mug, the specific posture of someone holding something warm against a cold they're not admitting. If she asks me, I said carefully, I'll tell her the truth. Okay. The truth being, Sovek. Her voice was flat. Not the blast shield flat. The other kind. The kind that means careful. Don't. Don't what? Don't say it like it's a report. She looked at me. Don't you do this thing where you start to say something real and, then, you archive it mid-sentence and, what comes out is the filing system version. I've noticed it. I felt something in the cavity of my chest that has no biological name. You've noticed it, I said. I have a file, she said. Very dry. The actually amused expression, except underneath it was something that was not amused at all. We looked at each other. This is a bad idea, she said. Not to me. To the coffee. Or the ceiling. To the particular ghost of prudence that had been following both of us around for 4 months and had clearly given up going to anyone else. Yes, I said. You're an archivist. Yes. She gestured at me in a way that I understood to mean, the general fact of your species, the secondary eyes, the non-human biology, the 12 archived photographs of late autumn rivers. Yes, I said. I leave in 6 weeks. I know. And, then, what? I did not have an answer to this. This is, I note, the first time in 4 months that I had encountered a question I had not quietly pre-answered in my own log. I had answers for everything else. I had answers I hadn't allowed myself to ask out loud yet. But, and, then, what? That was not a question with a filing cabinet. That was a question with a horizon. I don't know, I said. She nodded. We drank our coffee. After a while, she said, when we're together. What I'd tell her, if she asked. Is that, she stopped. Turned her mug in her hands. There's a thing that happens sometimes where I'm in the middle of a problem. Structural. Something that doesn't add up. And, I think I should show Sovek this. Not because you'd know the solution. You're not an engineer. But, because the way you look at things, the way you file them, changes what I see. You make me look at the load from a different angle. She looked at me. I'd tell her that. My archive of human intimacy language is extensive. I know what that means. Yael, I said. Don't, she said. Archive it. For now. Just, she turned back to her coffee. Just let it exist somewhere without a folder. I made myself not speak. Let it exist without a folder. That is, for the record, the most difficult thing I have ever done. And, I have been declared legally dead 3 times. We arrived at the Blue Door on a gray morning. The city was exactly what Yael's 2-word subtext had not said. It was old, layered, built for humans by humans over centuries, the kind of place that has been grieved over and, repaired and, grieved over again and, is still standing with the specific dignity of things that have survived themselves. The streets were narrow. The market was active. I could hear the transaction calls, the specific percussion of a Tuesday, and, I thought, of course. Devora was waiting on the step before we reached the door. She was smaller than her voice suggested, compact, precise moving, with Yael's brown eyes but, aimed at the world with different velocity. She looked at her daughter first. Then, she looked at me. I have been assessed by 63 different species in 9 years of fieldwork. This was different. She was not assessing my biology. She was not assessing the secondary eyes or the non-standard height or any of the things humans usually needed a moment to adjust to. She was assessing the distance between me and her daughter. The specific geography of two people standing next to each other. She looked at that distance. Then, she looked at me. Then, she stepped down from the door and said, "You're taller than I pictured." "Most beings are," I said. She laughed. Short, genuine, the laugh of someone who doesn't laugh as a social reflex. Yael said you'd say something like that. Did she? She said you do this thing, where you take a statement that's about you and make it about the category. So you don't have to, she gestured at herself. At the step. At the general emotional weight of a first meeting that was not, in fact, a first meeting. She said you file it. I looked at Yael. Yael was looking at the blue door. She mentioned the file, I said. She mentioned the 43 files. Devorah's eyes were doing something I was unprepared for, which was tender, specific, fully informed. She told me about the supply bay. The concrete form. That you noticed she didn't startle. It was notable. Yes. Devorah tilted her head. She also told me that you are the worst pretender she has ever met. The morning air moved through the narrow street. I don't, she said. Devorah smiled. Not the small mouth move kind. The full kind, reaching the eyes. She said the only thing that was pretend was the arrangement. That everything you wrote to me, everything you said, none of it was pretend. That she checked. She checked against what she knew about you and she checked against what she felt and she couldn't find the seam. I looked at Yael. Yael was still looking at the blue door. Her thumb was against her lower lip. The things I said carefully, were true. I know, Devorah said. That's why I wanted to meet you. She stepped back up toward the door. Pushed it open. I could see inside now, warm light, the smell of something cooking, the specific organized clutter of a house that has been lived in rather than maintained. Come in. Both of you. I made too much food, as a rule of principle. Yael finally turned from the door. She looked at her mother. Then, at me. The scene expression. Full, unguarded, no blast shield. I should have warned you, she said. Quietly. About her. She told me I was the worst pretender she'd ever met. You are. Is that, are you? It's a compliment, Yael said. In our family. She walked past me into the house. Through the blue door, into the warm light. I stood on the step for one moment. Above me the gray city sky did the thing skies do, which requires no documentation. A marked sound came from somewhere. Transaction calls. The percussion of a Tuesday. I followed her in. What happened in those 7 days I have not fully archived. This is a deliberate choice. Some things, I have decided, do not belong in a file. The dinner table that was too small for the number of opinions it hosted. Devorah's habit of arguing with her own stories mid-telling, stopping to fact-check herself and resuming with amendments. The neighbor who came by on day 2 and stayed for 6 hours and referred to me, by day 3, as the quiet one, which no one had ever called me and which I thought I did not mind. The second day, Yael took me to the place she grew up walking to, which was a bridge over a river that was, in late autumn, the specific brown of archived melancholy. She stood at the railing and looked at the water and said nothing for a long time. I stood next to her. I used to come here, she said. When things were too loud. Inside my head. Is it too loud now? She considered. No. We stood there. The river moved. I'm going to be posted again, she said. After this. Different station. Further out. I know. You're stationed at Meridian for 2 more years. Yes. She pressed her thumb against the railing. Not her lip, the railing. A different anchor for the same gesture. I'm not good at, she stopped. Start it again. I don't have a file system like yours. I can't just, I put things in a drawer and I close the drawer and eventually I need what's in the drawer and I don't know where I put the drawer. I know, I said. Sovek. I know. I turned to face her at the railing. She turned to face me. The river moved behind her, brown and steady and archived. The thing about a file system, I said, is that it requires you to decide what category something belongs in. And some things, I held her gaze. Some things don't have a category. So you make a new one. What's the folder called? I told her what I'd labeled it. She went very still. Then, she said, soft as a maintenance corridor at 0300 with retreating water and 2 people not choosing to step back, that's not pretend. No, I said. It isn't. The river. The gray sky. The specific weight of a Tuesday. She reached out. Pressed her hand against my arm, the middle forearm, the equivalent location in human anatomy of where a heartbeat can be felt, and left it there. Her heartbeat was not what I would call calm. Neither was mine, though mine requires different instruments to measure. Okay, she said. One word. Which was, I have cross-referenced extensively, the precise word she used in the engineering section in week 11. Same word. Different weight. Words accumulate weight with use, I have found. They do not stay the same. Okay, I said. On the last day, Devora walked me to the market while Yael was packing. This was not accidental. Devora's version of subtlety is a 30-minute market walk with strategic timing. She bought vegetables she did not need. She talked about the city, its history, the bridge, the specific load-bearing problems of old streets. Then, between a spice stall and a bread vendor, she said, she doesn't ask for things. I know. She never has. From anyone. Not even from me, when she was small. She squeezed a tomato with the professional attention of someone who has been doing this for 30 years. She asked you for this. The arrangement. She did. And you made it something else. She put the tomato down. Looked at me. Not on purpose. I don't think you knew you were going to. No, I said. I didn't. Does she know that you didn't know? I thought about the supply bay. The 0300 waking. The 18 drafts. Yes, I said. I think she does. Devora nodded. Moved to the bread vendor. Came back with a loaf she didn't need either. She's going to be posted far out, she said. The kind of far where communication takes 3 days each direction. I'm aware. She'll close the drawer. Matter of fact. Said the way Yael said blue door, 2 words with a house inside them. She always does. It's how she survives. She'll close it and go to work and she'll be very good at her job and every morning for 3 months she'll wake up and reach for the drawer and remember she closed it. The market moved around us. I know, I said. And then she'll stop reaching. Devora looked at me. And that will be the harder thing. When she stops reaching. I held her gaze. I'm an archivist, I said. I keep records. I know. Everything she sends me. Everything I send her. I maintain. I searched for the right human word. I maintain the record. Devora looked at me for a long moment. Then, she said, 43 files. Significantly more by now. She made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite something else. She turned back to the market. The transaction calls, the percussion, the Tuesday. Don't let her close the drawer, she said. I won't, I said. This was the first promise I have made in 9 years of field service that had nothing to do with my professional mandate. It was also, I understood standing in that market with the bread she didn't need under her arm, the truest thing I had ever said. Personal log archivist rank Sovek, station meridian entry 38, 3 days after departure the station is the same. 46 personnel now. The supply base still has the same inventory. Kel still produces alarming coffee. Dr. Okafor smiles at me in corridors in the specific way of someone who has said everything they need to say and is waiting for me to catch up. Ray has left 2 mugs out this morning. I left one of them where it was. The first transmission went out this morning. 3 days to reach her. 3 days to come back. 6 days between saying something and knowing if it landed. I sent it anyway. It began, I filed something today. Not in a folder with a label. Just, I let it exist. The way you asked me to. And, then, I did not archive what came next. This log entry ends here. I have cataloged 4,412 species across 11 star systems. I have never, before this, kept a record I wasn't willing to read back. I have one now. It is not labeled. It is growing. Author's note: Station Meridian filed a routine personnel transfer 3 months after the events in Part 3. The transfer request, submitted by Commander Yael Ashari from Renew posting at Station Far Reach, cited archival consultation requirements. The request was approved. Archivist Sovek departed Meridian on a Tuesday. He did not note this in his log. He didn't need to.